I was in the middle of a quiet evening, nursing a glass of whiskey in my study when my phone rang. The screen lit up with my wife's name, Melissa. We'd been married for 8 years, built a life together, shared dreams, struggles, and laughter. But in recent months, something had shifted. She was distant, always on edge, always finding excuses to stay late at work. I had ignored the signs, convinced myself that it was just stress, a phase we'd get through. But the moment I answered the call and heard her voice, I knew this wasn't a conversation about fixing things. "I'm divorcing you." Melissa's voice was eerily calm, almost rehearsed. "I've already sold the house. I just wanted to let you know." For a second, I didn't react. The words hung in the air, cold and final. Sold the house? My grip on the glass tightened, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Melissa," I said slowly, forcing the rising anger down. "What are you talking about?" She sighed, impatient, as if I were a child too slow to understand. "I met someone else. Someone who can give me the life I deserve." The pieces fell into place instantly. Her boss. A wealthy real estate mogul, twice her age but 10 times richer than me. The thought made my stomach turn. I had never been enough for her. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "You're just walking away? Throwing away everything we built together?" "It's not like that, Michael," she said, her tone filled with false sympathy. "You'll be fine. You're a strong man. But I can't keep pretending anymore. I love him." A slow, burning rage ignited deep in my chest. She had planned this. While I was working late, trusting her, believing in us, she was setting the stage for my downfall. "You're a coward," I said, my voice cold. Melissa hesitated. "I didn't call to fight. I just wanted to be honest with you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Honest? You're telling me this after selling our house without my knowledge?" "I handled everything," she continued undeterred. "I'll send you the settlement details through my lawyer. It's a clean break, Michael. Move on." Then, without another word, she hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling the walls of my life close in. The woman I had given everything to had not only betrayed me but made sure I had nowhere to return to. But if she thought I would take this lying down, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I sat in the dimly lit study, my fingers gripping the now warm glass of whiskey. The ice had melted, much like the illusions I had about my marriage. Melissa had played her move, swift, cruel, calculated. Now it was my turn. I wasn't the type to react emotionally. I didn't break things, didn't scream into the night. Instead, I let the cold, seething rage settle inside me. I was always a man of action, of strategy. She had taken everything from me, but she had also underestimated me. First, I needed information. I took a deep breath, then grabbed my laptop and began searching for the house records. If Melissa had sold our home, there had to be a paper trail. Within minutes, I found the transaction details. It had been sold 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. That meant she had made her decision long before this phone call. She had smiled at me, kissed me goodbye, and pretended everything was fine, all while she was setting me up for ruin. The buyer? One of her boss's shell companies. My fingers tightened into fists. So that was their plan. Take everything from me, cut me out cleanly, leave me with nothing while they built their perfect life on the ruins of mine. I inhaled deeply, pushing down the fury. They thought I was a fool. That I would just vanish quietly. They had no idea what was coming. I needed leverage. A man in my position, betrayed, discarded, had 2 choices. Break, or rebuild with vengeance in mind. I chose the latter. First, I called my lawyer, Victor Lawrence. He was a ruthless man, the kind who made people sweat in courtrooms. He answered on the second ring. "Michael. Late call. What's going on?" "I need a meeting," I said flatly. "First thing in the morning?" There was a brief pause. Victor was sharp. He could hear the edge in my voice. "Trouble? You could say that. All right. 9 a.m. my office." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, my mind already racing. Melissa thought she had control of the situation, but I wasn't about to let her dictate the terms of my downfall. Next, I checked our bank accounts. I wasn't naive enough to share all my assets with her. My personal accounts were untouched, but our joint account had been nearly drained. She had taken what she could. I smirked bitterly. Predictable. I pulled up a private email and started typing. If Melissa thought she could erase me from my own home and rewrite her future without consequence, she was wrong. I was about to burn everything they built together to the ground. The next morning, I walked into Victor's office with a manila folder filled with everything I had: bank statements, property records, transactions. He glanced over the documents, his face unreadable. Then he let out a slow whistle. She really screwed you over, huh? She thinks she has, I corrected. Victor leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his desk. You want to fight? I want to win, I said. He grinned. Good. Because legally, she's made some mistakes. I raised an eyebrow. Go on. First, selling the house without your direct consent? Illegal unless she forged your signature. That caught my attention. She wouldn't be that reckless. Victor smirked. You'd be surprised. But even if she managed to sell it legally, the fact that it was purchased through her boss's company? Conflict of interest. Could raise enough suspicion for an inquiry. I nodded slowly. That's exactly what I need. Victor's eyes gleamed with interest. What else are you planning? I slid another document across the table. It was an email I had drafted the night before, a detailed, anonymous tip to the IRS. Victor let out a low laugh. You're not playing fair, are you? I shrugged. Melissa and her boss want to play dirty? Let's see how they handle real pressure. His grin widened. I like the way you think, Michael. Let's get to work. That evening, as I was finalizing my plans, there was a knock at my motel door. I had been staying there temporarily, waiting for my next move. When I opened it, I wasn't surprised to see Melissa. She was dressed impeccably, like always, but there was something different, a hesitation in her stance. As if she wasn't as sure of herself as she had been over the phone. Michael, she said, offering a weak smile. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Melissa. She glanced past me into the room. Can I come in? I let out a small chuckle. After what you did? No. Say what you need to say and go. She sighed, clearly annoyed but trying to mask it. Look, I know you're upset. I raised an eyebrow. Upset? You stole our home. Emptied our accounts. Left me with nothing. I tilted my head. Do I look upset to you, Melissa? For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed her face. I just wanted to make sure you weren't, doing anything rash. Now it made sense. I smirked. Worried I might make things difficult for you and your boss? Her expression tightened. This doesn't have to be ugly, Michael. I let out a slow breath, watching her carefully. Oh, Melissa, I said, my voice smooth. It already is. She swallowed hard. I didn't want it to be like this. Yet here we are. For a moment she just stood there. Then, realizing she wasn't getting anywhere, she took a step back. I hope you'll be reasonable, Michael. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Don't mistake my silence for surrender. She hesitated. Then, with one last uncertain glance, she turned and walked away. I closed the door, exhaling slowly. She was nervous. Good. She had every reason to be. The night after Melissa's visit, I barely slept. Not because of grief, not because of longing, but because my mind was alive with strategy. She had come to me not out of guilt, not out of regret, but out of fear. That meant she suspected something. I needed to move faster. The first step was the IRS tip. I had spent the better part of the night refining the report, making sure every detail about her boss's shady dealings was accurate. He had money, sure. But money often came with skeletons. I wasn't aiming to get him fined, I was aiming to cripple him. If the IRS smelled something foul, they would dig. And when they dug, they would find rot. I sent the report at exactly 7 a.m., from an anonymous encrypted email. There was no going back now. By the time I walked into Victor's office later that morning, he was already on the phone, a knowing smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. When he hung up, he leaned forward, clasping his hands together. "You're not going to believe this." I sat down, waiting. "The house sale? It was legal," he admitted, "but the paperwork was pushed through suspiciously fast. Almost like someone pulled some strings behind the scenes." "Melissa's boss." Victor chuckled. "That's not even the best part. Turns out, his company is already under light scrutiny for possible tax fraud. Nothing major yet, but your little nudge to the IRS?" He whistled. "That's going to tip them over the edge." I exhaled, satisfaction settling deep in my chest. "And Melissa?" I asked. Victor's smirk widened. "Oh, she's about to have a very bad week." I walked out of his office with a sense of control I hadn't felt in weeks. Melissa thought she had won. She thought she had left me scrambling in the dirt, a man with no options. She had no idea that I had just set fire to the ground she stood on. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring twice before answering. "Michael?" The voice was unfamiliar, but the tone was urgent. "Yes. I work for Winston & Company," the man said quickly. Look, this is off the record, but you need to know, your ex-wife's new boyfriend. He's in deep trouble." I felt a slow smile tug at my lips. "Go on." "His accounts are under immediate review. Someone dropped an anonymous tip to the IRS, and now everyone is scrambling. But here's the kicker, Melissa's name? It's all over his recent transactions." I froze for just a second. Then a quiet chuckle escaped me. Melissa wasn't just a mistress. She was an accomplice. Now, she was sinking with the ship. "Thanks for the information," I said, my voice smooth. The man hesitated. "This isn't going to end well for her, you know." I let his words settle for a moment. Then I replied, "I know." And I hung up. 2 days passed before I heard from Melissa again. This time, she didn't come to my door acting smug. She didn't call me with that fake confidence in her voice. Instead, she texted, "We need to talk. It's important." I let the message sit for an hour before replying. "I'm busy." She called immediately. I stared at the screen, smirking as I watched her name flash. Then, just before it went to voicemail, I picked up. "What do you want, Melissa?" Her voice was different now, tight, frantic. The arrogance was gone. "Michael, please. I know you're angry, but I need your help." I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. "My help?" I repeated. "Now, why would I help you?" There was silence, and then a shaky breath. "Something's happening with Richard's company. Investigators have been asking questions. They're looking into financial records transactions. My name is on some of them." I closed my eyes, taking in the full weight of my satisfaction. This was exactly what I had wanted. "What a shame," I said, keeping my tone flat. "Michael," she snapped, her voice rising. "This isn't a game. They think I was involved in—" She stopped herself, lowering her voice. "I didn't do anything illegal." I laughed softly. "You didn't think leaving me homeless was illegal either, yet here we are. That was different. Was it?" She inhaled sharply. "Please. I just need to know if you—" She hesitated. "Did you have anything to do with this?" I let the silence drag. Let her sweat. Finally I answered, "Does it matter?" Melissa cursed under her breath. "I swear, if you're behind this—" I cut her off. "You'll do what exactly?" "You're in no position to threaten me, Melissa." "Not anymore." Silence. Then she whispered, "I messed up." I smirked. "Yes. You did." She was unraveling. The woman who had torn my life apart with such ease was finally feeling the weight of her own choices. I let out a mock sigh. Well, Melissa, it sounds like you have a mess to clean up. And since we're no longer married, it's not my problem. Her breath hitched. Michael, please. I hung up. And for the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. The next morning, I expected another call from Melissa. It never came. Instead, I received an email from my lawyer, Victor. Michael. Thought you'd like to know, Melissa's lawyer just reached out. She's trying to negotiate a deal. Call me when you're free. I stared at the message, a slow smile creeping across my face. Melissa was panicking. She had spent so much time believing she was in control, thinking she could waltz into a new life without consequences. Now she was scrambling. I called Victor. He picked up immediately. She's sweating, he said, amusement clear in his voice. Wants to amicably resolve things before this gets any worse for her. What did you tell her? I told her that depends entirely on you. I chuckled. Good answer. She's willing to settle fast. No drawn-out legal battles, no attempt to fight for assets. I think she's scared, Michael. Let her be scared, I said, stretching back in my chair. There was a pause. You really aren't going to cut her any slack, are you? I thought about it for a second. The betrayal, the lies, the way she had blindsided me and left me with nothing but anger and a burning desire to make her regret everything. No, I said simply. I'm not. Victor exhaled. Then let's make sure she doesn't just lose, Michael. Let's make sure she never forgets this. I grinned. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. 2 more days passed. Melissa didn't call or text again, but I knew she was running out of time. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was desperation. Then, on the 3rd day, I got a call. Not from her. The number was unfamiliar, but I picked up anyway. Michael Reynolds? Yes. My name is Agent Carter. I work with the Financial Crimes Division. We need to ask you some questions about a recent real estate transaction involving your former home. I leaned back, completely calm. It was happening. I'd be happy to help, I said smoothly. I was invited to their office that afternoon. I arrived early, dressed in a crisp suit. I wasn't the one under investigation, but I wanted to look the part, composed, untouchable. Agent Carter met me in a small, sterile room with a notepad and a file already open on the table. Thank you for coming in. No problem, I said, settling into the chair. How can I help? She studied me for a moment. Are you aware that your former home was sold under questionable circumstances? I tilted my head. I had my suspicions. Were you involved in the sale? I let out a humorless chuckle. Not even slightly. I found out it was sold the same way anyone else would, when my wife called to inform me I was now homeless. Agent Carter nodded, making a note. Did you ever give written consent for the sale? No. She flipped a page. And were you aware that the buyer was a company owned by Richard Hale? I figured it out afterward. I leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Agent Carter, how deep is Richard Hale in this mess? She didn't answer directly. Let's just say he's under a microscope. I smirked. Perfect. She continued. Melissa Reynolds' name appears on several transactions linked to Hale's personal accounts. We believe there may have been an attempt to hide assets or commit tax fraud. I exhaled, shaking my head in fake disappointment. That's unfortunate. Agent Carter closed the file. If this goes to trial, would you be willing to testify? I met her gaze. Absolutely. I left the office knowing one thing for certain. Melissa wasn't just in trouble. She was drowning. And I had no intention of saving her. I didn't hear from Melissa directly, but the news of her downfall traveled fast. Victor kept me updated, and every update was better than the last. Richard Hale's accounts were frozen. The IRS had officially launched an investigation into his finances, and Melissa's name had been tied to several transactions. Not only was she at risk of losing everything, but now, she was under suspicion of fraud. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any better, Victor called me with the biggest bombshell yet. She's been subpoenaed. I nearly dropped my coffee. What? She's being forced to testify about Hale's finances. The feds are looking into offshore accounts, tax evasion, potential fraud. She's knee-deep in this mess. I let out a low chuckle. That's poetic. Oh, it gets better, Victor added. Hale's legal team is already trying to distance him from her. If they throw her under the bus, she could be facing serious charges. I leaned back in my chair, letting it all sink in. Melissa had chosen money over loyalty, power over love. And now? Her precious safety net was being cut away. She deserves it, I muttered. Victor exhaled. So, what's next? Do you want to press further? I thought about it for a moment. I had destroyed her relationship, her security, her reputation. I had left her with nothing but regret and consequences. But was it enough? Then my phone vibrated. A new message. Melissa, please, Michael. We need to talk. One last time. I stared at the screen, a smirk forming. She finally understood. The storm she created had finally reached her doorstep. And now, she was begging for shelter. I let Melissa's message sit unread for a few hours. I wanted her to feel the weight of my silence. I wanted her to wonder if I would ever respond. When I finally did, my reply was simple. 8 p.m. The Greenstone Cafe. One chance. She responded almost instantly. I'll be there. By the time I arrived at the cafe, I had already decided how this meeting would end. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to save herself. The thought alone made me sick, but I needed to see her crumble with my own eyes. Melissa was already seated in a dim corner, her hands wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee. She looked different, exhausted, unpolished. The stress of the last few weeks had taken its toll. Good. I pulled out the chair across from her, keeping my expression unreadable. Michael, she said, her voice quiet. Thank you for coming. I didn't respond. I just waited. She hesitated, then let out a shaky breath. I know you hate me. And I deserve it. That made me chuckle. Finally, something we agree on. Melissa flinched but didn't argue. I need to ask you for something. There it was. I leaned forward. Of course you do. Her hands trembled slightly. I need you to tell them I had nothing to do with Richard's finances. That I wasn't involved in anything illegal. I stared at her unimpressed. You want me to lie for you? She swallowed hard. It's not a lie. I didn't know. Don't, I interrupted, my voice low but firm. Don't sit here and insult me with more lies. Melissa's eyes filled with desperation. Michael, I could lose everything. You already have, I said coldly. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. I was stupid, she whispered. I thought he would take care of me. I thought I was finally getting the life I deserved. I tilted my head. And what life was that? A life of stolen wealth? Of stepping on people who trusted you? Melissa looked away, ashamed. I exhaled, shaking my head. You made your choice, Melissa. And now you have to live with it. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't know what to do. For a brief moment, I just watched her. The woman who had destroyed me was now utterly powerless. And I could end this one of two ways. I could offer her mercy. A chance to rebuild. Or I could watch her drown. I tapped my fingers against the table, considering. Then, slowly, I leaned forward. You're on your own, I said. Her breath caught. Michael, please. I stood up, throwing a few bills on the table. Good luck, Melissa. Then I walked away. I never looked back. Melissa didn't contact me again after that night. Maybe she finally realized that no amount of begging could change what was coming. Maybe she had hoped I'd be her salvation, and when I denied her, she finally understood there was no saving her. Victor called me 3 days later. It's official, he said, satisfaction dripping from his voice. The feds have opened a full-blown case against Hale. His assets are frozen, his company is in chaos and... He chuckled. Melissa? She's on their list of persons of interest. I exhaled, letting the moment settle in. Will she be charged? Victor hesitated. Hard to say. If she flips on Hale, she might avoid prison, but even then, she's ruined. No money, no reputation, no future in that world. I smirked. Good. She'll probably try to cut a deal. Victor continued. Testify against Hale in exchange for immunity. But even if she gets off legally, she's lost everything. I should have felt satisfied. This was what I wanted. Melissa had betrayed me for a life of wealth and status, and now, she had nothing. And yet, instead of celebrating, I felt empty. Not regret. Never that. But the fire that had driven me forward, the need for revenge that had consumed me, it was gone. Melissa had already destroyed herself. I didn't need to do anything else. Victor cleared his throat. So what now? I thought about it for a moment. Then, finally, I said the words I had been waiting to say for weeks. Now? I exhaled, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. Now I move on. For the first time in weeks, I slept without anger burning in my chest. The war was over, and I had won. Melissa had nothing left, no luxury, no power, no one to run to. Richard Hale's empire was crumbling, and she was sinking with it. I could finally breathe. But moving on wasn't as easy as I thought. Revenge had kept me going for so long that without it, I felt unmoored. I had spent so much time focused on destroying Melissa's future that I hadn't thought about building mine. So I started small. I rented an apartment. A simple place, nothing flashy, nothing excessive, just mine. I began reconnecting with friends I had pushed away during the chaos. Some were hesitant at first, unsure if I was still the man they knew. But as time passed, the conversations became easier, the laughter more natural. Then, one evening, as I was organizing my new place, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Michael, it's me. Melissa. I stared at the message, my stomach tightening. After everything, she still had something to say? Another message followed. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I let out a slow breath. Not once in this entire ordeal had she truly apologized. Not when she betrayed me. Not when she watched me struggle. Not when she begged for my help just days ago. And now? Now that she had lost everything? Now that her world had burned to the ground? Now she was sorry? I hovered over the screen, considering my options. Then, I deleted the message. No response. No anger. No final words. Melissa was a chapter that had already ended. And I had no interest in reopening the book. Months passed, and with them, the weight of the past began to fade. Melissa was gone from my life, just another memory of betrayal and consequence. The last I heard, she had turned on Richard Hale to save herself, feeding the investigators everything they needed to bring him down. But even that hadn't saved her. She wasn't arrested, but her name was ruined. No job, no home, no power. She was nothing. And I had everything ahead of me. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. I wasn't consumed by anger or loss. I was free. One evening, I found myself sitting on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the city lights flicker below. A drink in my hand, the cool night air against my skin, peace. Something I hadn't felt in so long. A thought crossed my mind then. If I could go back, if I could warn my past self of what was coming, would I? Would I tell him not to trust Melissa? Not to marry her? To walk away before she ever had the chance to betray me? I took a slow sip of my drink and smiled. No. Because now, after everything, I knew exactly what I was capable of. I knew what it meant to be broken and to rebuild stronger. And most importantly, I knew that no matter how deep someone tried to bury me, I would always rise. The past was behind me. The future was mine. And I was finally ready to live it. The end. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.